All right, you saw it. We're having an event on May 9th. Get your tickets. If you didn't see the promo because you're on the podcast, go to asodu.com. Get your tickets for May 9th. We have an insane show to talk about today. You wouldn't believe it a year ago.
Everywhere I go, the people really want to know who I is and who I be.
In the show notes this morning, when we put it in, I wrote just 24 months ago, today's episode would seem like crazy talk. But instead, it's real talk, right? Because as we're going to talk about Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter, Texas turning up the heat on Vroom. You're like, Vroom, where'd they come from a year ago? And then Meta is opening a real world store to sell Metaverse equipment and push people into the Metaverse. It's like, first of all, 22 years ago, you'd be like, the Meta who? Vroom who? What are you what's all this gibberish?
What are all these words that you have on a page? And then it's like,
then if we
this
threw
guy, we know he builds cars and, solar panels, but track with me here. He bought a social media platform.
He just executed a hostile takeover of Twitter brilliantly.
He's like, what?
I think it really is one of those things like you boil the frog and you don't realize that. I mean, we didn't even mention blockchain, NFTs.
We just skipped it.
Lockdowns. Matt, 24 months ago, well, actually 24 months ago now, we would know what a lockdown was.
Right.
Unfortunately, we would know.
Unfortunately, right.
Okay, but all the other stuff for sure. I mean, it's easy to forget the staggering velocity that we've been moving on for the last 24 months, which means we've kind of normalized to it.
Yeah, I think about this in just the reality of a week for me right now. If like associating that to just over 2 years ago, how the pace of a week, the pace of news, the pace of, the mentality on customer experience, all of that, the pace at this point then feels like drag pace, right? And I think everybody in business is dealing with that. It was kind of like there's this just rhythm, and you just kind of did things, and everyone kind of showed up, and then boom, things happened. And there's a pace right now that sometimes almost feels like a frenzy to me. Does that make sense?
No, we've had to get used to operating well in frenzy mode. Really, it's almost like battlefield logistics. Yeah. Like things are changing all the time. And you literally, like when you go into battle, they say you never know exactly what's going to happen because you never know what the enemy's going to do. Like you can plan, but when you hit the battlefield, guaranteed something's going to happen that you didn't plan for, right? Because there's just too many possible scenarios. So, I mean, I feel like we're getting very conditioned to do things we never thought were possible. We talk about it all the time. The 4-minute mile, it was totally impossible. Actually, people were like, we're pretty sure the human heart will explode if you run a mile in 4 minutes. And then one person does it. And then now like it becomes the training benchmark that many people do. And I think we're living in that world. I mean, the NADA conference, right? And I think it's still like this. They may be trying to change it. But typically if you're going to be a speaker at NADA, right? You give your submission in I don't know. It's like in the summer.
Yeah. It's like 3 days from now, actually, for next year.
Is it really 3?
Probably.
We missed it again. So it is. It's like now, and then they review it, and then they approve it, and you need like final slide deck, everything you're going to be talking about in March of 2023 into them by like September. And that the funny thing is, like that used to be just fine.
Right.
It used to be just fine.
Yeah, and I think there's always been that kind of struggle, but it used to be just fine.
It was fine.
I mean, if you think about the things that have happened in the last 24 months from a retail business experience perspective and what we've had to adjust and shift on, right? There are some normalcies. Like we talked about yesterday, the fact that people are pressing into, vehicle buying centers and buying vehicles. Like I did a presentation at Driving Sales last year that I could probably give today, and there'd be a whole subset of dealers that are just approaching that.
It's like
so there are some
tackling.
Yeah, there's some blocking and tackling still to get rid of, and to get in, and and now we've got if anyone's thinking Google, with the GA4 changes for analytics, we're going to be talking about that for the next 14 months until the old analytics are sunset. So there are some of those like regular business things but to really be dynamic with anything that you're talking about in the industry, it's a day-to-day type thing. And that's not just because of what's happening in automotive, but it's because of what's happening outside of automotive as well. And I think that's where interestingly enough, where we kind of lean in on this podcast every single day is, hey, we're going to look inside and outside of automotive, because they all are impacts on how the business operates.
Great segue without being a segue. Great segue without being a segue. So let's talk inside and outside automotive. Vroom is getting sued. This news dropped last week, but we never talked about it. Vroom is getting sued by Texas. You know you're in trouble when Texas is suing, right? Over alleged deceptive trade practices. From the article, according to a news release distributed last Wednesday, the lawsuit against Vroom, who sells vehicles to Texas consumers also under the name Texas Auto Direct, you may already know this, alleges that the company misrepresented and failed to disclose significant delays in transferring clear title and obtaining vehicle registrations. We're back to the titling and registration, something that auto dealers are really good at, that everyone took for granted. How hard can it be? It's just a piece of paper. Also, Vroom failed to disclose vehicle history, condition, and financing terms, and they have received 5,000 complaints to the Better Business Bureau. And if you just Google Vroom lawsuit, actually, the news about this doesn't even show up because there are so many people on Reddit threads saying, "Can I sue Vroom?" It's not a good place to be.
Yeah, I mean, the typical thing for me, when dealers start talking about Vroom, they go to the reviews page, and it's like this question mark of, so what you're really saying is putting out a 3.4 star aggregate review rating is a good thing, Vroom? You know, because that's what they literally have that on the website. You know, we've seen Carvana struggle with this same type of thing.
Yeah.
And I honestly, at some level, I am sympathetic, because I do know from a dealership operation perspective, when you're dealing with anything across state lines, the dynamics and the intricacies of tax, title, registration are extreme. It honestly, it's a problem that the states have. That's the bigger problem here.
Well, it definitely needs to be normalized.
Yeah.
I mean, I bought over the pandemic, I bought a car from Wisconsin, and it was disgusting getting the title over to New York. I mean, granted, it was in the middle of COVID that complicated it, but it had to like go through a title processing place in Delaware. I was like, what is going on with this? Obviously, this is a problem that like blockchain is going to solve very easily, like proof of ownership, when we get to that. But hey, here's the thing.
The other piece of this for Vroom, and I got to say this, is what's really interesting is if you know to the Texas Direct brand, which 5 years ago was when Vroom purchased Texas Direct, which was an intentional thing to be able to do a lot of the recon and house a lot of vehicles, because Texas Direct has
Texas Auto Direct Auto was awesome.
Yeah. So and Texas Direct had an absolutely incredible reputation in the Texas market, from what I understand, at least.
Yeah, no, they did.
Looking back,
absolutely.
I knew the brand. There were a lot of people in the retail automotive industry actually looking to Texas Direct to what are they doing next. They're getting it right.
Absolutely.
The showroom experience, the online experience, they had all that right, which was what Vroom was hoping to acquire. But the scale up of that is what has and the corporatization, which I don't know if that's a word.
It is. It's a word.
Yeah,
you got it.
There you go. Has really, took a negative impact on that really solid brand.
It's one of the problems that I think comes with either success or, in this case, just getting a lot of public money.
Yeah.
Right. The margin for error just widens so much that I think it's really easy to go to sleep and lose focus on the fundamentals of the business.
Yes.
And you see it all the time with public companies, because, Ben Stock talks about this. They're playing with public money. Like, no one really feels it when they take the hit. The feeling of it is so collectively spread out that there's no real consequence. And let's be honest, like, consequence is a great motivator. And when you remove that from the situation, like, I think things just begin to slide like this.
I do think, as I'm thinking through this, and just for those mid to large size auto groups that have dealer principals or general managers that are kind of tuned into this type of news and pointing the finger, I think it's a time to kind of reflect. As brands centralize, as brands kind of roll up to a group level, and I'm thinking all the way from, a Lithia with Driveway and Asbury with ClickLane, Sonic, Group One are all doing similar things. There's also mid-sized groups that are doing this regionally, and there is a massive danger to like losing the impact of the local brand when you roll up. And so for the groups that are doing that, I think it's the right move, being very attentive to this, like as you move to a corporatization and as you move to a centralized approach to your marketing and brand, realizing that that local dealer has a lot of real world experience to be able to execute the things that still have to be done at the corporate level, and not just saying, oh, because we're corporate, we know how to do this. Recognize that the local brand has a lot to say about it.
It's almost like you got to remember the personalization of it in the midst of the corporatization of it, because like when you go to that was a mouthful.
That was a serious mouthful. I don't even know if I could type that.
I definitely couldn't spell it. Right? You think of like any big corporation that you do business with that makes you feel amazing. It's because the person at the end of the chain, the person on the front line, did something to personalize it. That's why like Nordstrom, Ritz-Carlton, they get it so right, because they formalize and corporatize the overall trajectory of it. But when that server is at the table, it's ladies and gentlemen helping ladies and gentlemen, right? Serving ladies and gentlemen, and you feel it. So I don't know. There's a lot there to unpack. Thanks for giving us something to talk about, Vroom. We appreciate it. We hope you get it right. We really do.
Yeah.
All right.
Speaking of big corporations,
segue
time.
Oh, this is like an understatement. That segue button doesn't do this one any dang justice.
Big corporations. However, the whole like personalization, human touch thing is a little. That's not the segue we're looking for. If you know what I mean.
No, there's not. Everyone's talking about it today. I saw the news come through on one of my apps. Elon Musk's bid to buy Twitter is accepted, and I was just like, wow, hey, he did it. He did it. Like, how did this even happen? So the how did this even happen actually spurred a little bit of research. So I looked up a timeline and found a great little article. We linked it up in the show notes. Let's go through the quick timeline of events of how this actually transpired, because you may have started hearing it somewhere along the process, and then it just executed in a flurry of Elon Musk now buying Twitter and like the whole thing. And so he bought it for $54.20 a share, which is a 38% premium over the stock. I don't know that any Twitter shareholder was expecting to get a 38% return on their investment in Twitter. Here's a quick timeline. In January 31st of this year, so less than 3 months ago, Musk started buying Twitter stock. On March 24th, so now we're a whole month, almost 2 months later, he starts openly critiquing Twitter on Twitter. Right? He's saying, I'm worried that there's a bias in the algorithm that's affecting free speech. Free speech is essential, and is a new platform needed? Right? And he says, I'm giving serious thought to this. On April 4th, his stake in Twitter becomes public. He's saying, oh, I know, it's all of a sudden he owns 9.2% of Twitter and everybody knows it now. And Twitter says, hey, come join the board. The next day, he files to become an active investor, right? It's a designation that allows him now to be openly saying, like, I'm active, I'm trying to influence the company, and therefore, could influence the stock price. A few days later, he was like, they were like, hey, come be on the board. Like, this guy's going to be trouble. We need to get him inside. He was like, oh, I'll consider it. This is, Kyle, this is when you were like, if anyone ever had a question on whether or not Elon Musk is a car guy.
Right. He took the deal away. It was incredible. He just grabbed the piece of paper off the desk, walked off, and took the deal away. It was unbelievable.
So this is April 9th. On April 10th, Twitter made that news public, and speculation abounds. The next day, he filed another thing with the SEC saying he could buy as much as he wants. And then on the 14th, so let's do this. On the 5th, he became an active investor. On the 15th, 14th, almost 10 days later, he said, here's my best and final offer. It was his only offer, by the way. He said, I have one offer for you. And it was $54.20, which is, by the way, what it closed at. Then Twitter said, I don't think so. The very next day, they said, no way. We're going to try to stop you from buying this at any. Our commitment is to the freedom of speech and all that stuff. And then the next day, it's revealed that how many shares, Kyle, did Twitter's board? How much did they own? The board, collectively, the whole board. That's like, no way.
Less than 2%.
We don't want your garbage offer. We don't have any money vested in this company except for the fact that we get big paydays and we have a lot of power on the board. They said that, and then kind of the temperature changed a little bit. And he was like, oh, yeah, watch this. I'm going to offer it to every single shareholder to buy their individual shares, which he was allowed to do. And then he pulled out the big stick, and he said, by the way, I've got the money lined up. That was a game changer, because at that point, he put the board in the position saying like, hey, if you don't consider this offer seriously, it's obvious you're not acting in the best interest of your shareholders, which is a legally binding fiduciary responsibility, which they'd be in for a lot of trouble. A couple days later, they held discussions with Musk. And just yesterday, they're like, all right, we'll sell it.
And we'll do it.
So start to finish, less than 3 months, 10 weeks.
I don't think there's much more to say outside of the world's literally flipping. Elon knows it.
Yeah, he does.
And he's grabbing at the things that allow him to make a massive impact on both his personal brand and society in a place where the opportunity is rich. And whatever side you land on this, whether you're happy or mad about it or anything like that, for me, like where the rubber meets the road is that there are opportunities like this that exist everywhere. And depending on your brand, your company's brand, or anything like that, keeping your head up and recognizing the opportunities and working those opportunities intelligently will give you a leg up on whatever impact factor is happening around you.
Absolutely. I love that, the bringing it down to the ground, because everyone has something like that somewhere that is in your sphere of control. We'll get to our last story in a second. This buttons up. His last and final offer was the offer that was accepted. This deal will take 6 months to close. Like you said, there are people big time on both sides of this. A lot of speculation inside and outside the organization. And now, you've done it right when you have Jeff Bezos throwing rocks. Be like, you have a lot of business in China. I wonder if China now has an elevated voice in the town square. Says the guy who owns a premier newspaper and obviously has no ties or issues or any integration with China, because nothing that's sold on Amazon is made in China at all.
Not at all.
Never got a Chinese made product from Amazon. Not once. So we'll see how this one plays out. We'll see how this plays out. And I guess that's really all we can do. All right, let's talk about another big company that has also very close ties to automotive. Meta. Kyle, why don't you talk about this? I'm tired.
Well, this is just hilarious. Look, I'm gonna lay this out. Every dealer everywhere should be like, look, see, brick and mortar, right? Because Meta, in an obvious move, instead of putting a Metaverse place to order their Oculus or any of their smart glasses from, they in fact go and are putting a 1,550 square foot space located in Burlingame, California, where employees are focusing on the metaverse, virtual worlds where people will be able to work, play, and socialize. The store will feature products that allow you to be in the metaverse. So they're putting a brick and mortar store to sell things to get you into the metaverse. The irony is so unique here.
It's so good. At first, I thought they were going to roll these out all over the country. Maybe they will. This is just the first. They didn't announce any big plans. But, they're like, hey, I think this is really a big acknowledgement of like the big time, like skepticism. Like, I don't think that is going to be fun at all. Like, I'm not going to sit with an Oculus. And so I think that's just an acknowledgement of like, you have to try it. You just have to try it. And I'll tell you, the first time I put VR goggles on, it was the PlayStation ones. And it's a pretty awesome thing. Like, you put them on and all of a sudden you start like looking around and you're like, okay, this is definitely different. This place has a wall-to-wall curved LED screen that displays what you're seeing in virtual reality. So, the 100 people that are standing around you and you have the goggles on can see in a big wraparound format, like, oh, this is what you're seeing. That could be pretty cool. So, I mean, look, this is, again, another move toward this integrated world of the metaverse and the real world and everything in between. And again, man, if it was 24 months ago, I really think you'd listen to this episode and be like, is this an April 1st episode?
Yeah. You know what's even more ridiculous? I think in 24 months, we're going to look back at this and be like, that was all? That was all?
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. But we have no idea what or when it's going to happen. But here's the deal. We have a full day that we can react to everything that we've just heard and make the next best move together. We're here for you. You're here for us. We're all here for the community. Let's get it done.